This is going to be an optimization video. I'm just going to tidy up some of the code, the scene, and do a few other things just to make our scripts a bit nicer and our game a bit more manageable. So in the last few videos we finished the drag mesh object, so this 3D mesh that changes its shape based on the 2D drag. And that's really awesome. We finished all that, but we can tidy up a few things. The first thing is this code is a bit unreadable. There's a few things scattered around, so I'm just going to tidy things up. I'm going to put these objects here, so the near clip plane and the far clip plane, we're going to define them together, and also the width and the height. So I'm just going to cut this and paste it here as well. It's just so all the variables are together. Okay, tidy things up. And we don't have to define the rotation of the pointer object here. We've done it here before we start working out the points. So then we can just collapse things like that, and now all the points are together. So that's good. So the second thing is I want to actually delete the drag mesh camera from our scene because we don't need it. I used it in the beginning so it was easier to explain about the clip plane theory and changing the far clip plane and things, but we don't need it now. So the first thing I'm going to do, I've got a method at the bottom of my script somewhere. I'm just going to collapse some of these regions to make our script a bit manageable, and I think this is the one, update drag mesh camera on the far clip plane. So if we delete the drag mesh camera, the only variable in this method will be the distance to the ground from the camera. But I'm going to work out the distance from the main camera. It looks like we've already done that. So I'm just going to replace the drag mesh camera, so this one here, with the main camera. Okay, and we don't need this anymore. We don't need to work out anything on the far clip plane. Instead, I'm going to call this method distance from the camera to ground, so the ground layer. I'm going to rename that now, and we can just save this out, and we can just, all we need to do is return this value. I'm going to call it, instead of far clip plane, just new far plane value. And I'm just going to replace this value here with this and get rid of the floats because we've already defined it, and I'm going to return this value. So instead of a void, I'm going to make this a public float. So we've just got a method just to work out the distance from the main camera to the ground, so the terrain in this case. We haven't used the drag mesh camera anywhere else, that's good. Okay, so we've used the old method somewhere in the top of our update function, so I think it was here. So update drag mesh camera far clip plane. We don't need that anymore. Instead, when we work out the far plane value, I'm just going to pass in that function. So distance from the camera to ground, copy that. When we go and update our camera, if I can find that, so update drag box mesh, I'm going to place it in the far clip plane. So far clip plane points, instead of getting the drag mesh camera, I'm just going to call this function. It's going to bring in the distance from the camera to the ground. And for the near clip plane, I'm just going to use the camera main near clip plane. So I'm just going to go through the script and search for drag mesh camera and replace everything with camera main. So we can open this up and type camera main. Okay, so I'm going to replace that, and we don't need to store the drag mesh camera as a class variable anymore. And let's just go down and see if we can find any more. Camera main transform. So we've used it a couple of times here to work out the clip plane points. Camera main field of view, and we can put camera main aspect. So it's not found anymore in our scene script, so I can assume that we're not using it anymore. And that's all we need to do in the mouse. So all we've done is just change the method to work out the distance from the camera to the ground. And for the world camera, we can just totally remove all the drag mesh camera stuff. So delete this. We don't need to transform it in any way, and we don't need to transform it on the update. So if I delete the camera from the scene now, delete, and we've got a bit of an error. Return new far plane value. I'm just going to declare this as a 0 to begin with. I think that's why the error is coming up. So let's just double check. That's absolutely fine, because if we didn't have a raycast to interact with anything, it would just return like false or nothing or null. So it wants to return a float. So we just return 0 to begin with. So I should have realized that. Never mind. So if I jump into the game now, we've deleted the drag mesh camera. So I'm going to play the game, just double check everything's working as it was before. So our mesh is there. Yep, so everything's working just fine. If I just rotate, yep, the height, the distance to the ground's working pretty well as well. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is delete this drag select mesh object. I don't want this mesh laying in the scene because we only use it when we drag our mouse, and it could be a bit confusing. We might not know what this is. So I want to delete this and then generate one through script. So I'm going to remove this from the scene. Well, just deactivate it for now and remove it when we've finished coding. So let's just save this out. And in our mouse scripts, let's try and find the create, that's the one, create drag box mesh. And we're going to create it right here. So the first thing we need to do is say drag select mesh equals a new game object, if my laptop loads, and I'm going to give it a name. So drag select mesh name equals drag select mesh. Alright, let's change its position to the origin because it always needs to be the origin of in-world space. So again, drag select mesh, transform position is vector 3 0. Just a quick way of declaring a new vector 3 of 0 0 0. So we can assign the components. I'm going to delete this for now. We don't need that. So we can say we can define a mesh renderer. I'm going to call it renderer equals drag select mesh, add component. So we're adding components on the fly here. Mesh renderer. Okay, and we can now define it a material because for now we've been using the white paint material with the pattern on it. So I'm going to get rid of that pattern because I'm actually using that material on the wind turbine. As you can see, I don't want that pattern on my turbine, so I'm going to remove it now. Go to our white paint and just change this to none. So now everything's back to normal. And another thing I noticed was, you know, if you've been watching the previous video, we had the normal issue. If we attach this material on the drag box here, we won't have the normal issue. We'll be able to see the box in all angles. So I don't know why that is, but I'm going to do that now. So renderer material equals, I'm going to define a new variable here. So I'm going to call it drag select mesh mat for material. So I'll assign this material once we finish coding, because if I save out the scene right now and jump into it, we haven't declared our mesh object yet and it will flag an error. So let's do that in a sec. So the other thing we need is a mesh filter. I'm going to call this filter equals drag select mesh, add component again. This time we're adding a mesh filter. Okay, and then we can just define the mesh equals filter mesh, and then we're done. And then we can jump to clear the mesh and then create the mesh. So we've just added all the components we need, the renderer, the filter, and we'll add all the colliders and stuff in the next video. So the next video is going to be all about the colliders. If we jump in here, our mesh does now exist. I don't know if this drag selects mesh material. So if we go back to the top of our script, I'm going to define this at the top. Public material, we then need to attach a material and jump back into the scene, and I think I'm just going to use the white paint material. So if we go to the world object, drag the white paint onto this, and if I play the game now, everything should work fine. So I'm going to actually delete this from the scene, I don't think we'll need it, and play the game. Okay, so if we turn around, there it is. I thought it disappeared for some reason, but if I drag this out now, as you can see, it doesn't disappear. There's no normal issues, which is really weird. I don't know exactly why that is, but it turns out things work better if you code it in C# rather than drag it into the scene. So yeah, we can see all the points now at any angle, unless we intersect it, but it works a lot better than it did before. So everything's working cool now. We don't need to rely on this game object lying in our scene for no reason, and the whole scene looks cleaner. Before I continue, actually, I'm going to define the pointer name, because at the moment it just says new game object in our scene. So we can say pointer name equals pointer. Okay, I noticed another one as well, but I'll find that in my spare time. So I think that's all I wanted to do in this video. So we've deleted the drag mesh camera. We don't need that anymore. We've converted our updating the file clip plane to just a method that updates the distance from the camera to the ground, and we've also deleted our drag select mesh and assigned it through code, and that works pretty well. So in the next video I'll talk about the colliders, attaching a collider to this and things, and interacting with the units in the game, and then we'll carry on to another topic. So thanks for watching the video. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video.